Go away, I said, Royal King's Horse Guard. S. Thomas was a boy who lived in a small village that lay at the foot of a large, ancient castle. The castle had tall stone walls that seemed to touch the sky, with towers that glimmered in the sunlight. Every morning, Thomas would wake up early just to watch the castle from his window. From a distance, he could see the royal guards riding their strong horses in the courtyard, moving in perfect lines and performing drills that seemed almost magical to him. The sound of the hooves hitting the stone echoed through the village, and Thomas would listen carefully, imagining that he too was part of the royal court. Thomas' father worked in the castle stables. He took care of the horses that belonged to the king and his guards. From a young age, Thomas had learned about horses from his father, how to brush them, feed them, and care for their strong legs and shiny coats. But seeing the royal guards ride these magnificent animals made Thomas' heart race with excitement. He wanted nothing more than to get closer to them, to see the uniforms up close, to understand how they trained the horses so well. Every day after finishing his chores at home, Thomas would sneak out and walk toward the castle. The guards were always stern and serious. They wore shining armor that reflected the sunlight, and their horses were perfectly groomed. Thomas would hide behind the tall stone walls, watching the guards as they drilled their horses. He loved to study every movement, the way a guard's hand held the reins, the way the horse's hooves lifted in unison, the discipline and precision that made it seem like magic. Thomas' curiosity was unstoppable. One morning, he decided to climb over the low section of the castle wall to get a closer look. He was careful not to make any noise, but his heart pounded so loudly he thought the guards might hear it. As he crouched behind a large oak tree near the stables, he saw one of the horses looking different from the others. It was smaller, with a brown coat that gleamed in the sun, but its gait was uneven. Thomas noticed that one of its legs seemed to hurt. It limped slightly with every step. He frowned, worried. The guards did not seem to notice, busy practicing their drills and shouting commands. Thomas felt a mix of fear and excitement. He knew that getting caught in the castle could be dangerous. The guards were strict and rarely tolerated intruders. But he also knew he could not ignore the horse's pain. He crept closer, keeping himself hidden behind barrels and stacks of hay. The horse's eyes were wide, as if it too knew it was struggling. Thomas' heart ached. He wanted to help, but he had no idea how. He had learned about taking care of horses from his father, but he had never dealt with a royal horse. He knew he had to be careful. One wrong move could get him into trouble. While Thomas watched, the guards continued their drills. They shouted orders in deep, commanding voices. Left turn, faster. Hold steady. Thomas could barely understand all of the commands, but he noticed that no one paid attention to the limping horse. He felt a strong sense of responsibility. Even though he was only a boy, he decided that he had to do something. He remembered his father telling him once, "Sometimes doing the right thing means standing up, even when it scares you." Those words rang in his mind, giving him courage. Thomas waited until a guard rode his horse away from the limping animal, leaving it momentarily alone. Quietly, he stepped out from his hiding place. He approached slowly, speaking softly to calm the horse. "It's okay," he whispered. The horse lowered its head, seeming to trust the boy. Thomas knelt beside it and gently touched its leg. The skin was warm, but there was a small cut hidden under the fur. He pressed his fingers gently to see if it hurt. The horse flinched but stayed still, as if it understood that Thomas was there to help. Thomas knew he had to act carefully. He ran to the stables to fetch some clean cloths and a small bottle of water that his father always kept. He came back and cleaned the cut as best as he could. The horse seemed calmer now, and Thomas felt a sense of relief. He was proud of himself for helping, but at the same time he knew the guards could return any moment. He hid behind a cart, watching nervously as the soldiers moved closer. Just then, one of the guards turned his head and spotted Thomas. "Hey, boy! What are you doing here?" the guard shouted. Thomas froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the stern look on the guard's face. The boy realized that if he spoke, he could be in serious trouble. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Go away," I said, as he tried to protect the horse from any sudden movements of the guard. The horse, sensing Thomas' fear, stamped its hooves, adding to the tension of the moment. The guard paused, confused for a second. Thomas held his ground, staring at the man with wide eyes, not ready to leave the horse behind. For a few moments, it felt like time had stopped. The sun reflected off the guard's armor, and the boy could feel the weight of every decision he had ever made. Finally, the guard shook his head and motioned to the other soldiers. "Move along, nothing to see here," he said. Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had not been caught, and the horse was safe for now. That day, Thomas learned something important. Courage did not mean not feeling fear. It meant taking action despite being afraid. He also understood the bond between humans and animals, and how important it was to stand up for those who could not speak for themselves. As he walked back to his village, he could still hear the echo of the horse's hooves, and it reminded him of the adventure he had that morning. Thomas could not stop thinking about the horse and how the guards had ignored its pain. He decided that he would keep visiting the castle every day, watching carefully, learning more, and helping whenever he could. He felt a strange sense of purpose, as if he had found something that mattered deeply to him. Even though he was just a small boy in a large, intimidating world, he knew that his actions could make a difference. As evening fell and the sky turned orange, Thomas returned home. His father asked where he had been, and Thomas simply smiled. He did not tell anyone about the limping horse or the guards. This was his secret adventure. That night, as he lay in bed, he dreamed of galloping horses, shiny armor, and a castle where even a small boy could make a big difference. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of his many adventures with the royal guards and their magnificent horses. After that morning in the castle courtyard, Thomas could not stop thinking about the limping horse. Every day, he found himself walking closer to the castle walls, trying to catch another glimpse of the guards and the horses. The feeling of being near the majestic animals made his heart race with excitement, but it also made him nervous. He had narrowly avoided getting caught the last time, and he knew the guards were strict. Yet he could not resist the pull of curiosity and compassion. One afternoon, Thomas arrived at the castle earlier than usual. The sun was warm, and the birds sang sweetly in the trees. The village seemed quiet, but the castle buzzed with life. Servants carried baskets of food to the kitchen, and guards practiced their drills in the courtyard. Thomas crouched behind a large oak tree near the stables, watching carefully. His eyes immediately sought the brown horse he had helped before. To his relief, the horse was there, looking healthier than before. Someone had clearly tended to it, but Thomas still felt a strong urge to check on it. As he observed, Thomas noticed a change in the atmosphere. The guards were moving faster, shouting louder, and their horses responded with sharp precision. Thomas had never seen the horses so disciplined. He realized that the training of these animals was not just about strength, but also about patience, trust, and careful guidance. Every movement seemed planned and purposeful, as if the horses and their riders shared a silent language. Thomas felt amazed and a little envious. He wished he could be part of that world where humans and horses moved as one. Days passed, and Thomas' visits became more frequent. He began learning small details about the routines of the guards and their horses. He noticed which guards were strict and which were kinder, which horses were fast and which were gentle. He even started memorizing the commands shouted during drills. His mind was full of questions, but he knew that asking them aloud in front of the guards would be dangerous. Instead, he kept careful notes in his head, observing quietly, learning like a shadow in the sunlight. One morning, Thomas arrived to find a new guard supervising the horses. The man was tall, with sharp eyes and a commanding voice. He moved with authority, and his presence made the other guards seem more tense than usual. Thomas watched him closely, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. The new guard seemed to notice Thomas hiding behind the tree, but instead of shouting, he simply raised an eyebrow and returned to his work. This small gesture made Thomas realize that courage could sometimes be about patience, not just action. That day, Thomas saw the limping horse again. Its leg was still a little sore, but it seemed to move more steadily. However, another horse had a new problem. Its saddle had been tightened too much, causing the animal to shift uncomfortably. Thomas felt a surge of worry. He knew that if the guards did not notice, the horse could be hurt during the drills. He wanted to rush in, but he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned. Observation first, action second. He waited patiently, watching for the right moment. Hours passed, and the horse's discomfort grew. Thomas realized he had to act. He crept closer, keeping himself hidden behind a stack of hay. He gently whispered to the horse, calming it. He loosened the saddle strap just enough to ease the pressure, careful not to disturb the guard's work. The horse relaxed under his touch, and Thomas felt a sense of quiet triumph. For a moment, he forgot the risk of being caught. His focus was entirely on helping the animal. Just as he finished adjusting the saddle, a guard appeared from around the corner. Thomas froze, holding his breath. The guard's eyes narrowed, scanning the area. Thomas felt panic rising in his chest, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Slowly, he stood upright and faced the guard. "The saddle, it was too tight," Thomas said softly, hoping to explain without sounding disrespectful. The guard's expression softened slightly. "You have a good eye, boy," he said, "but you must be careful. This is not a place for children to wander freely." Thomas nodded quickly, relieved that he had not been scolded harshly. The guard gave him a small nod of approval and returned to his duties. Thomas' heart soared. He realized that sometimes courage meant not just acting, but speaking up in the right way. Over the next few weeks, Thomas became bolder. He started paying closer attention to the horse's needs. He learned to recognize signs of discomfort, fatigue, and stress. He watched how the guards handled difficult animals, noting the gentle corrections and the firm guidance. Thomas began to see patterns, how patience and consistency built trust, not just with horses but with people as well. Every day brought new lessons, and Thomas felt his confidence growing. One day, a small accident occurred. During a routine drill, one of the horses stumbled on the uneven stone courtyard. The rider nearly fell, and the horse shook nervously, its ears pinned back. Thomas' heart jumped. He wanted to rush forward, but he remembered the importance of timing and caution. He observed quickly, noting which guards were rushing to help and which horses were reacting poorly. Then, as the guards managed the situation, Thomas quietly stepped forward to soothe the frightened horse. He whispered softly, stroking its neck and calming its trembling body. The horse relaxed under his touch, and Thomas felt a surge of pride. He had acted carefully and effectively, helping without causing more chaos. However, not everything was smooth. Some guards were suspicious of Thomas. They whispered to each other, noting the boy who lingered near the stables and seemed unusually interested in the horses. Thomas could feel their eyes on him, their glances sharp and wary. He learned to move with more caution, hiding behind barrels, trees, and carts. He also learned to blend into the background, appearing as if he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Every day was a careful balance between curiosity and discretion, excitement and fear. Despite the challenges, Thomas found moments of joy. He discovered that one of the older guards, a kind man named Henrik, often left small treats for the horses, apples and carrots hidden in the stables. Thomas began helping quietly, placing the treats in safe spots and watching the horses enjoy them. Henrik noticed the boy's actions one day and gave him a small, approving nod. It was the first time Thomas felt that a member of the Royal Guard truly saw him, not as a nuisance, but as someone who cared. Thomas' bond with the horses grew stronger. He began to understand their personalities. The gentle giants who moved slowly but confidently, the spirited young ones who leapt and galloped with endless energy, and the quiet observers who watched everything carefully. Each horse had a story, and Thomas felt privileged to witness it. He realized that caring for the animals required more than strength. It required patience, attention, and empathy. As the weeks turned into months, Thomas became a familiar presence in the stables. The guards began to accept him quietly, though some still watched him with suspicion. He had earned small victories, the trust of the horses, the approval of Henrik, and the quiet knowledge that he was making a difference. Yet Thomas knew that the world of the castle was larger and more complex than he had imagined. There were rules, hierarchies, and dangers he had yet to face. One late afternoon, Thomas was watching the sunset from his hiding spot near the stables. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the castle walls glowed warmly in the fading light. The horses grazed peacefully, and the guards were packing up for the day. Thomas felt a deep sense of contentment. He had learned much, grown braver, and felt closer to the world he admired so deeply. But he also knew that his journey had only begun. For Thomas, every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove his courage. He had discovered that bravery was not about loud declarations or reckless actions. It was about observing carefully, acting thoughtfully, and standing up for what mattered, even when others might not notice. The castle, the guards, and the horses had become more than a fascination. They had become a calling. As Thomas walked back to his village that evening, he felt a quiet determination building inside him. He was no longer just a boy who watched from a distance. He was a young caretaker, a learner, and someone who understood the delicate balance of responsibility and courage. The events of these weeks had shaped him in ways he could not yet fully understand, but he knew one thing for certain: he was ready for whatever came next. And so, as the village lights twinkled in the distance and the stars began to appear in the night sky, Thomas' heart was full of hope. He dreamed not only of galloping horses and shining armor, but of a future where he could truly make a difference in the world he loved so dearly. Little did he know, the challenges and adventures ahead would test his courage, wit, and compassion in ways he could never have imagined. One bright morning, Thomas arrived at the castle earlier than usual, eager to see the horses and the guards. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the castle walls in golden light. Thomas could hear the faint sound of hooves as the guards prepared for the day's training. His heart beat faster than ever. Today felt different, though he could not explain why. Something in the air made him feel as though a great event was about to unfold. As he crouched behind the familiar oak tree near the stables, Thomas scanned the courtyard. The horses were restless, moving nervously as the guards arranged them in neat rows. Among the familiar faces, Thomas noticed a young, inexperienced guard struggling to control a spirited black horse. The horse snorted and pawed at the ground, its energy nearly spilling over. Thomas' eyes widened. He knew that if the guard did not handle the situation carefully, the horse could panic and both could be hurt. Without thinking, Thomas crept closer. His small frame allowed him to move silently, like a shadow among the barrels and haystacks. He whispered softly to the black horse, hoping to calm it. "Easy, easy, calm down," he said. The horse's ears twitched, and it slowed its frantic movements just enough to give the guard better control. Thomas felt a surge of relief. He had done it before, and now he had done it again, but he knew this was only the beginning of a much larger test. Suddenly, one of the senior guards shouted a command. "Hold the line." "Attention!" All the horses shifted into formation, and the courtyard filled with the rhythmic sound of hooves striking the stone. Thomas froze, realizing he had moved too close. The guards' sharp eyes were sweeping the area, searching for any intruders. He ducked behind a large wooden cart, holding his breath as one guard's gaze passed only inches away. For a moment, Thomas feared he would be caught, but luck seemed to favor him and the guard moved on without noticing him. Thomas' relief was short-lived. He glanced at the black horse again and noticed something alarming. Its left front leg was swollen, and it seemed to struggle with each step. Panic rose in Thomas' chest. He knew that if the horse continued to train in this condition, it could be seriously injured. His instincts screamed at him to act immediately, but he also knew the risk. The guards were strict, and interfering could get him into serious trouble. He had to be careful, precise, and fast. Without hesitation, Thomas darted closer, slipping behind the wooden posts that lined the courtyard. He knelt beside the horse and whispered softly, "It's okay, I'm here, you'll be fine." The horse's eyes softened, and it lowered its head slightly, trusting the boy. Thomas examined the leg quickly. There was a small wound hidden under the fur, likely caused by a rough patch of stone during the last training session. The swelling worried him, but he remembered what his father had taught him. Gentle pressure and care could help ease pain until proper help arrived. Thomas gently wrapped the horse's leg with a clean cloth he had carried in his small satchel. He poured some water over the wound to clean it and whispered reassuring words all the while. The horse calmed under his care, and Thomas felt a quiet triumph. He had once again acted bravely, but he knew that this act alone was not enough. He had to ensure that the horse received proper attention soon, or it could be hurt further during the drills. Just as Thomas finished, a voice thundered across the courtyard. "What is this boy doing here?" Thomas froze. The king's chief guard had noticed him. The man was large and imposing, with eyes as sharp as a hawk. Thomas' heart pounded in his chest. He knew that he had no choice but to explain himself. I was helping the horse," he stammered. "It hurt its leg and no one noticed. I just wanted to make sure it would be okay." The chief guard stared at him, his expression unreadable. The courtyard seemed to fall silent. Even the clatter of hooves faded into the background. Thomas held his ground, hoping that the truth would be enough to save him from punishment. The guard's eyes softened slightly as he looked at the black horse. "You saw the problem and acted," he said slowly. "Do you understand how dangerous this is?" Thomas nodded, feeling both fear and determination. "Yes, sir, but I could not let the horse be hurt." For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then, unexpectedly, the chief guard motioned to the other guards. "Step back, let the boy finish." Thomas' eyes widened in surprise. He had expected anger, scolding, perhaps even punishment. Instead, he found himself being allowed to help. Carefully, he applied a few more adjustments to the horse's leg, soothing it with quiet words and gentle touch. The guards watched, some with suspicion, others with what seemed like admiration. By the time Thomas finished, the black horse was calm and seemed comfortable enough to return to the stable. The chief guard walked over, placing a firm but approving hand on Thomas' shoulder. "You have courage, boy," he said. "Not many would risk the king's displeasure to do what is right. Remember this, but also remember that timing is everything. Courage alone is not enough. You must act wisely." Thomas nodded eagerly, soaking in every word. His heart swelled with pride and relief. Word of Thomas' bravery spread quickly through the castle. The older guards whispered about the boy who had dared to intervene with the royal horses. Some viewed him as reckless, but others saw a spark of something special, a young mind capable of courage, insight, and compassion. Thomas, however, did not let the praise distract him. He knew that he had only done what he felt was right. There was still much to learn and many horses to care for. The black horse, now resting in its stall, seemed to recognize Thomas. Its eyes followed him, soft and trusting. For the first time, Thomas truly understood the bond between human and animal. This was not just admiration or fascination, it was mutual respect and trust. Thomas realized that the lessons he had learned from observation, care, and courage were shaping him in ways he had never imagined. He felt stronger, braver, and more aware of his responsibility. In the days that followed, Thomas continued his quiet work. He checked on each horse, learning their individual needs and temperaments. He observed the guards' training techniques, noting which methods encouraged cooperation and which caused tension. Thomas began to understand the delicate balance between authority and empathy, discipline and kindness. The castle had become his classroom and the horses his teachers. But Thomas' actions also brought new challenges. Some guards began to watch him more closely, questioning why a small boy spent so much time near the stables. Whispers followed him wherever he went, testing his confidence and resolve. Thomas learned to navigate this new environment with patience. He discovered that courage was not only about bold acts, but also about resilience, standing firm even when others doubted or challenged him. One afternoon, the king himself visited the stables unexpectedly. Thomas froze, hiding behind a stack of hay, unsure if he should reveal himself. The king walked among the horses, speaking briefly to the guards, asking about their well-being and progress. Thomas watched, mesmerized by the presence of royalty. He realized that the world he admired was more complex and magnificent than he had ever imagined. This was a world of responsibility, courage, and careful judgment. Later that evening, Thomas walked home through the village, exhausted but exhilarated. His mind replayed every moment of the day, the panic, the action, the relief, and the quiet moments of connection with the black horse. He understood now that bravery came with challenges, and that doing the right thing often required patience, intelligence, and careful timing. Thomas felt ready for whatever came next, even though he knew that life in the castle would continue to test him in unexpected ways. For Thomas, that day marked a turning point. It was not simply about helping a horse or avoiding punishment. It was about understanding his own courage, his responsibilities, and the delicate balance between action and thought. He had discovered the power of empathy, the importance of observation, and the strength that comes from doing what is right, even in the face of fear. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Thomas lay in bed, dreaming of galloping horses, shining armor, and a future full of challenges and opportunities. He knew that he had taken the first steps toward becoming someone who could make a difference, not only for the horses, but for the world around him. Little did he know, the coming days would bring tests far greater than a wounded horse, tests that would challenge his courage, his wisdom, and his heart in ways he could never have imagined. The days following Thomas' brave intervention with the black horse were not as simple as he had hoped. While some guards admired him quietly for his courage, others were less forgiving. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and Thomas could sense that not everyone in the castle trusted him. Some guards looked at him with suspicion, wondering why a small boy was so determined to involve himself in matters far beyond his years. Thomas felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. He had acted from the heart, but now he realized that every action had consequences. One morning, Thomas arrived at the stables to find tension in the air. The black horse was calm, grazing quietly in its stall, but several guards were gathered nearby, talking in low voices. Thomas noticed that their expressions were serious, almost angry. He approached cautiously, unsure of what had sparked the conversation. One of the senior guards noticed him and motioned him closer. "Boy," the guard said, "you need to understand that your actions, while brave, have caused a stir. Not everyone appreciates interference from someone your age." Thomas nodded, swallowing his pride. "I only wanted to help the horse," he said softly. "It could have been hurt if no one acted." The guard's eyes softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "Helping is admirable," he said, "but the castle operates under strict rules. Ignoring them, even for good intentions, can lead to trouble. You must learn to balance courage with patience and caution." Thomas felt a pang of disappointment. He had thought that doing the right thing would be enough, but now he realized that bravery alone did not guarantee approval. Over the next few days, Thomas noticed a subtle change in the way some guards treated him. They were less welcoming, keeping a careful distance. He felt the weight of their judgment, and for the first time he wondered if he had made a mistake by intervening. Yet, Thomas could not ignore the horses. Every day he returned to the stables, quietly observing and tending to the animals whenever he could. His bond with the black horse deepened, and he learned more about its temperament, its habits, and its fears. One afternoon, a new challenge arose. During a routine drill, one of the horses became frightened by a sudden noise, a cart falling in the courtyard. The horse reared, bucking violently, and the rider struggled to regain control. Panic spread through the training ground. Thomas' heart pounded as he watched the scene unfold. He knew that the horse could hurt itself or the rider if it was not calmed quickly. Instinctively, he ran forward, ignoring the cautious voice in his mind that warned him of the guard's strict rules. "Go away!" Thomas shouted, hoping to clear the area so he could help safely. The guards turned in surprise, unsure of how to respond. With careful, gentle movements, Thomas approached the frightened horse, speaking in soft, soothing tones. The horse's eyes widened, but it gradually began to calm under his guidance. Thomas stroked its neck, whispering reassuring words, and slowly the animal regained its composure. The rider, shaken but unharmed, slid off and gave Thomas a look of gratitude. The other guards, however, were less pleased. The chief guard strode forward, his face stern. "Boy, do you understand the danger you put yourself and others in?" he asked. Thomas nodded, feeling a mix of pride and fear. "Yes, sir," he said, "but the horse needed help." The chief guard's expression softened slightly as he looked at the black horse, now calm and steady. "Your heart is in the right place," he said, "but courage without caution can lead to disaster. You must remember that." Thomas felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He had saved the horse, yes, but he had also challenged the rules and risked punishment. Despite the tension, Thomas' actions began to earn him a quiet respect among some of the guards. Henrik, the kind older guard, approached him later that day. "You have a gift," Henrik said quietly. "You see what others overlook. But you must learn to act with patience, not just bravery. Observe, understand, and then act. That is how you will truly make a difference." Thomas listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized that the castle was teaching him lessons far beyond caring for horses. It was teaching him about responsibility, discipline, and wisdom. However, not all consequences were so gentle. Some of the younger guards, jealous of the attention Thomas received from the senior guards and the chief, began to challenge him in small ways. They tested his knowledge, questioned his actions, and sometimes deliberately made the horses difficult to handle when he was nearby. Thomas felt frustration and anger bubbling inside him, but he remembered Henrik's advice. He took deep breaths, observed carefully, and responded with calm, measured actions. Over time, even the skeptical guards began to notice that Thomas' presence helped rather than hindered the horses. One evening, Thomas faced perhaps his greatest challenge yet. The castle was preparing for a grand event, a ceremonial parade where the king's guards and their horses would display their training for visiting nobles. The courtyard was filled with horses and riders, each preparing meticulously. Thomas noticed that one of the horses, a young white stallion, was anxious and restless. Its ears twitched nervously, and it shifted from hoof to hoof. Thomas could sense that if the horse panicked during the parade, it could cause chaos. He approached cautiously, speaking softly to the stallion. "It's okay," he whispered. "You can do this, I'm here." The horse's eyes met his, and it seemed to understand. Thomas guided it through a series of calming exercises, helping it focus and relax. The other guards watched in silence, some skeptical, some curious. When the parade began, the white stallion moved with confidence, keeping pace with the other horses. Thomas felt a surge of pride. He had prevented a potential disaster, and he had done so without breaking the rules. That evening, as the castle quieted and the last of the horses were returned to their stalls, Thomas reflected on the day. He realized that courage alone was not enough to face the challenges of the castle. It required patience, careful observation, understanding of the rules, and the ability to act wisely in moments of need. Thomas felt himself growing, not just as a boy who loved horses, but as someone who could make thoughtful decisions under pressure. Yet, even with these lessons, Thomas knew that the castle would continue to test him. Every action had consequences, both good and bad. He had earned respect, yes, but he had also faced jealousy, suspicion, and the constant reminder that the rules of the castle were strict and unforgiving. Thomas understood that his journey was far from over. There would be more moments of danger, more decisions that would test his courage and wisdom, and more opportunities to learn the delicate balance between bravery and caution. As he walked home through the village that night, Thomas thought about the lessons he had learned. He thought about the black horse, the young white stallion, and the other animals he had come to know so well. He understood now that every action mattered, that his choices could have lasting effects, and that true courage was about more than daring deeds. It was about responsibility, empathy, and wisdom. Thomas' experiences had taught him to observe carefully, act thoughtfully, and face challenges with a steady heart. He knew that the coming days would bring new tests, perhaps more difficult than anything he had faced so far. But he also knew that he had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. He was learning not just about horses or guards, but about himself and the kind of person he wanted to become. As he lay in bed that night, Thomas dreamed of the courtyard filled with horses and guards, of the challenges he had faced, and of the victories, both small and significant, that he had achieved. He knew that the castle was a place of learning, testing, and growth. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he was ready to face whatever came next, armed with courage, careful thought, and the quiet strength that comes from doing what is right, even in the face of difficulty. The seasons changed, and Thomas grew taller and stronger, but his love for the castle and its horses never waned. Each day brought new lessons, and each day he became more confident in understanding the needs of the animals and the ways of the guards. Over time, Thomas' quiet dedication began to earn the respect of more than just Henrik and a few sympathetic guards. Even some of the skeptical soldiers started to notice that the boy who had once seemed reckless was now careful, thoughtful, and capable. One crisp morning, Thomas arrived at the stables to find a flurry of activity. The king himself was scheduled to inspect the stables and the horses. Thomas felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wanted everything to be perfect, both for the animals and for the demonstration in front of the king. The horses were groomed and fed, the stalls were clean, and the guards prepared for inspection. Thomas moved quietly among the animals, checking that each one was calm and comfortable. The black horse nuzzled him gently, as if offering reassurance. Thomas smiled, feeling the bond they had formed over the months. When the king arrived, the castle was alive with activity. Servants hurried about, guards stood in perfect lines, and the horses moved with disciplined grace. Thomas watched carefully from the side, ensuring that no horse became anxious or startled by the crowd. He noticed one of the younger horses, a brown mare, showing signs of nervousness. Its ears twitched, and it pawed at the ground. Thomas approached it slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "It's okay," he whispered. "You can do this, just focus on me." The mare responded almost immediately, calming enough to walk steadily alongside its rider. Thomas' heart lifted with relief. The king moved through the stables, inspecting the animals and speaking briefly with the guards. Thomas watched every detail, learning from the way the king observed and questioned. The experience was both awe-inspiring and educational. He realized that the king, while a figure of authority, also cared deeply about the well-being of the animals and the people responsible for them. Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was not just a boy watching from the sidelines. He was part of a system that valued care, responsibility, and dedication. After the king's inspection, Henrik approached Thomas. "You have come a long way," Henrik said quietly. "The way you handle yourself, the horses, and the attention of the guards shows maturity far beyond your years. But remember, this is only the beginning. Life in the castle will continue to challenge you, and your actions will always have consequences." Thomas nodded, feeling proud but also aware of the weight of responsibility. He understood that true respect was earned through consistent effort, thoughtfulness, and courage. As the weeks passed, Thomas continued to grow in skill and confidence. He learned to anticipate the needs of the horses before they became problems, and he developed a deeper understanding of their personalities. The black horse, once injured and fearful, now trusted Thomas completely. The young white stallion had become calm and disciplined, a testament to Thomas' patient guidance. Even the skeptical guards began to rely on him quietly, consulting him when they noticed signs of discomfort or stress in the animals. However, Thomas' journey was not without challenges. One afternoon, a sudden storm swept over the castle, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The horses grew restless, frightened by the loud thunder and the pounding rain on the stone courtyard. Guards struggled to maintain control, and chaos threatened to erupt. Thomas felt a surge of fear, knowing that a single misstep could lead to injury for both horse and rider. He ran among the stalls, calming the animals, securing the saddles, and guiding the guards in handling the frightened horses. His voice was firm but gentle, carrying over the roar of the storm. Slowly, order was restored. By the time the storm passed, Thomas was soaked and exhausted, but he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had acted decisively, thought carefully, and used everything he had learned to prevent disaster. Henrik, who had been assisting the guards, approached him. "You were remarkable," Henrik said. "Not just brave, but wise. Courage is important, but it must be guided by understanding, care, and quick thinking. You have shown all of these today." Thomas smiled, feeling a quiet pride in his heart. In the months that followed, Thomas' reputation in the castle grew. The guards, who once whispered about him with suspicion, now included him in discussions and sometimes even sought his opinion. Thomas remained humble, understanding that his role was still that of a learner and caretaker. But he also knew that he had earned a place of trust and respect, a place he had never imagined when he first crouched behind the oak tree, watching the horses from a distance. Thomas also began to notice the impact of his actions beyond the stables. Villagers spoke of the boy who cared for the royal horses, and some even sought advice from him on how to treat their own animals. Thomas realized that his courage and care had ripple effects, influencing not only the castle but also the wider community. He felt a deep sense of purpose. The lessons he had learned about patience, courage, and responsibility were not just for the castle, they were lessons for life. One bright morning, Thomas received an unexpected honor. The king himself asked to meet him. Thomas was nervous but excited as he entered the royal hall. The king smiled warmly, his eyes kind. "Thomas," he said, "I have heard of your bravery, your care for the horses, and your wisdom beyond your years. You have shown courage, thoughtfulness, and respect for life. These are qualities that will serve you well, not just in the castle, but wherever your path may lead." Thomas bowed respectfully, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. The king continued, "It is rare to see a young person so dedicated and thoughtful. Your actions have reminded us all that courage is not just about bold deeds, but about responsibility, care, and wisdom. I hope you will continue on this path and know that you have my respect and trust." Thomas' heart swelled with emotion. He had come a long way from the curious boy who first sneaked into the castle courtyard. His journey had been full of challenges, but he had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident. That evening, Thomas returned to the stables, reflecting on the years of learning and growth. He walked among the horses, speaking softly to each one, feeling the bond they shared. The black horse nuzzled him gently, and the white stallion stood calmly by his side. Thomas realized that his journey was not just about bravery or skill. It was about connection, understanding, and the quiet strength that comes from doing what is right, even in difficult circumstances. Thomas also reflected on the challenges he had faced with the guards. He had learned that respect was earned through consistent effort, honesty, and humility. Even those who had once doubted him now acknowledged his contributions. Thomas felt gratitude for the lessons they had taught him, the importance of patience, observation, and thinking before acting. These lessons would stay with him forever. As night fell, Thomas looked out over the village and the castle courtyard. The stars twinkled above, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. He felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. His journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had shaped him into a young person capable of courage, empathy, and wisdom. He understood now that true bravery was not about seeking recognition, but about acting with integrity, even when no one was watching. In the years that followed, Thomas continued to care for the royal horses, becoming a respected member of the stables. He trained younger boys in the art of horse care, passing on the lessons he had learned from Henrik, the guards, and his own experiences. The castle, once a distant place of fascination, had become a home and a place of growth. Thomas never forgot the early days when he crouched behind the oak tree, learning, observing, and dreaming. Those moments had laid the foundation for everything he had achieved. Looking back, Thomas realized that his journey had taught him more than he could have imagined. He had learned the value of courage tempered by wisdom, of patience combined with action, and of empathy that extended to all living creatures. He understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but he was ready to face them with the knowledge, skills, and heart that he had developed through his experiences at the castle. And so Thomas' story became one not just of a boy and his horses, but of growth, courage, and understanding. It was a story of how small actions, guided by care and responsibility, could have far-reaching effects. It was a story of learning, facing challenges, and emerging stronger. And most importantly, it was a story of a boy who dared to act, who cared deeply, and who learned that true bravery comes from the heart. Thomas knew that his journey was far from over. But he also knew that he had the courage, the wisdom, and the compassion to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as he looked out at the castle, the horses, and the world beyond, he felt ready for all that life had to offer, carrying with him the lessons of his past and the promise of his future.